So Scott Wiley, President, Secretary, Treasurer, and sole shareholder of Practical Christian Counseling, where he's the lone practitioner. He's also the lead pastor of Word of Hope Wesleyan Church and head cheerleader for Celebrate Recovery at Word of Hope. He is husband to Pat for 37 years, dad to Joshua, Caleb, and Nathan, father-in-law to Erica, Ashley, and Taylor, and grandpa to Liam, Connor, and Emery. I give you Scott Wiley.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having this group, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you today. I got invited to be a part of 1 Million Cups by Gordon Decker. I'd never heard of it before, and he and I had been talking about stuff, and he said, well, you got your own business and stuff, like, right? It's like, yeah, I got this private practice and I'm trying to get going. It's like, well, then you're an entrepreneur. It's like, really? And yeah, you should come to 1 Million Cups. And so I started coming, and I found out, it's like, wow, I really kind of like this. I'm really getting a lot of help. It's been very encouraging and helpful to hear other people's journeys, and I like the unplugged sessions where we learn some stuff and do table talk, and I really have gained a lot out of being part of 1 Million Cups. And so I really appreciate the organization and all of you being a part of it and everything. So about my entrepreneurial journey, it kind of came when I figured out that what my life purpose was. And I know this sounds big and grand and grandiose and everything, but I really wanted to narrow down, it's like, what is my life about? Who am I? What is it? Can I get it into a sentence? And I was at a workshop one time, and I heard one of my mentors, another pastor, a professor at my alma mater, he said he got his down to 2 words: develop people. And I thought, well, he's getting close to retirement age. I think I'll just take his. And because I thought that's exactly what I feel like my life is about, is to develop people to reach their fullest potential in Christ. And so that became my life purpose. The backstory to that is I wasn't raised going to church, being a Christian. My grandfather's a scientist. My dad's a scientist. We were very cynical, scientific kind of people. And when I was a mid to late teenager, I found God. You know, it was a big eye-opening experience. I mean, like, he invaded my life, and I just really, it's like, wow, this is really real. And so I became a believer. And so ever since then, you know, I've made it kind of my mission to serve him. Well, as I got older, I started out as a youth pastor, and then was an assistant pastor in town here in charge of discipleship and Christian education, which basically meant I ran everything except Sunday morning service. And I had about 96 volunteers underneath me, and was coordinating all that effort, and needed to develop my philosophy of discipleship. And discipleship is basically developing people, you know, in Christ. That's basically a discipleship statement right there. And as I was developing that, I realized that a lot of people come into churches with life. You know, people are people wherever you go. Anybody that's sitting in a pew is just like anybody who's sitting in a ball game. You know, they've got problems with their kids, they got problems with their relationships, with their marriages. They might have an addiction, they might have compulsion, they might have some kind of a hang-up, they might have a mental illness, they have fears, they have financial setbacks, they've got all kinds of issues. And they're seeking out help. And so I would sit across the table, across the desk from people, and they would kind of come and bring life issues to me, and I would be like the deer in the headlights, kind of look at them and say, I don't know, here, let me pray for you, here's a verse, you know, and didn't know how to help them. And I thought, if I'm really going to help people, I need to know how to work with them better. And my undergrad training helped me to be a pastor and taught me theology and all that kind of stuff. But to really get down into the nitty-gritty of people's lives, not so much. So I decided I needed to pursue more education. We try the next slide. So So I decided to go back to my alma mater, which is Indiana Wesleyan University. I started on a master's in ministerial education. I got about halfway through that. By the way, how much of a master's is half a master's? So you don't have a master's. But I worked on half the coursework and got halfway through it, got into a lot of debt, was flying back and forth to Indiana, and decided, I don't want this degree. This degree is not helping me in my present work with people. This would help me become a professor or something like that with students, and that's not where I'm going. So I quit. I quit that. But in the meantime, I started my entrepreneurial journey with JC and Vending. That does not stand for Jesus Christ of Nazareth, but it can if you want it to. It stands for Joshua, Caleb, and Nathan, our sons. And so I started this vending business to help. My big idea was like, man, I read about these people who were selling gumballs and they're financing their education. I'm going to do that. I'm going to sell some kind of gumballs or have vending machines, and I'm going to finance my master's degree. And so I did it exactly the wrong way. I'm not much of a businessman. I feel like I am an entrepreneur, but not much of a businessman, which basically means an unsuccessful entrepreneur. It helps if you have some business sense. So what I did was I put some vending machines on my credit card, and then I went and did some market research to figure out where can I place these things. And looking back on it, thinking, wow, that was really foolish. Because I found out that any place that has vending machines already has like a corporate contract with a vending machine supplier. And so I was able to get into a laundromat, maybe the bowling alley, and maybe the Fizz Kids when they were going. I was really scratching for those people that didn't already have a corporate contract. I ended up just losing everything on that, everything I had invested in it. I ended up giving the business away to a high school kid and said, here, you run this and make it your entrepreneurial dream, and take off with it. And so that didn't work out so well. And so that was my first big failure and first big lesson in entrepreneurialism. I quit this degree program, and go to the next slide, I think, and I started a new one at South Dakota State University. I decided that what I really need to do to help people reach their fullest potential in Christ, to work with people in the nitty-gritty of their lives, is to learn how to counsel, how to talk to people about their problems, because I didn't really know how to do that. I knew how to preach, I knew how to teach, I could do all that stuff. And so found out this SDSU had a West River program for counseling and human resource development. A whole bunch of people have been through it. I think Melanie and I were in the same class in that. And so I pursued that and got my master's in counseling and human resource development, agency counseling as opposed to like school counseling. And because that was my philosophy of discipleship. If you're going to walk with people toward wholeness in Christ, you need to know how to work with people. You're going to have to be able to unpack the hefty bag that everybody carries around on their back. Next slide. At the same time that I started this degree program, I was working at First Wesleyan Church as Christian Education Discipleship. I was approached by the board and the pastor saying, hey, we want to start a new church out in Rapid Valley, and we think you should lead this. What do you think? And I didn't want to do that. I really wasn't seeing myself as much of an entrepreneur. I had JC and Vending just fall through the through the floor, and so I prayed against it for about a month, and then God convinced Pat and I, my wife and I, that this is what we're calling you to do. So I spent about 6 months recruiting people from within the church to be on a launch team. I went and did some training in North Carolina and also in Indiana. Recruited these people, worked with them for about 9 months every week, working on vision, working on core values, working on logistics. I worked with our district, my denominational district, to figure out the 501c3 and the EIN and all the legal stuff, and started to to shape it up. They provided some seed money. The mother church, First Wesleyan, provided my salary for the first 3 months of working there. And so I started a degree program and launched a church basically at the same time. And we called it Word of Hope Wesleyan Church. Our mission is to come alongside people and walk with them toward wholeness in Christ. Very similar to my life mission of develop people to their fullest potential in Christ. And so really that is the biggest entrepreneurial thing I ever did. It involved a lot of people. We got about 37 people, 13 families. And now this last time we were able to have a weekend service, we had about 175. And so we've been at it for 17 years. And we're still just kind of moving along. It's been a hard road. We had temporary places to meet, like we were renting space. We've been to 7 different locations. Finally, in 2010, I was able, after writing 20 letters to property owners, I actually got somebody to donate a couple of acres to us, and so we got that. And then a couple of years later, we were able to build. In 2010, we opened up our first building. And I think I got a picture. Let's try that. Oh, when I finished my degree program, the church was still struggling. And so this is before we built a building. And they couldn't really pay me. And so I was doing my internship at South Dakota School of Mines and Technology in the counseling department under Jolie McCoy. And so I got to the end of my 1 year of internship and said, hey, is there any way to get hired here? And at least part-time. And so they rearranged money, and she was desperate for a part-time person. Here they had a guy that could have a flexible schedule and only needed part-time because I still had the church too. And so they figured it out and they hired me. But the dean of students came to me and said, we're going to work this out to hire you part-time, but you need to look for a grant. That day, I found a grant that was for suicide prevention among college students. And so I wrote up a whole suicide prevention program. The dean of students and Jolie worked out all the other parts of it. And a few months later, Jolie calls me on the phone and says, are you sitting down? We got the grant. Are you ready to go to work full time? And I had to go to my church board and say, this thing's happening. What do you guys think? And they're like all in favor. And so I ended up working full time, about 50, 60 hours a week for the school, about 20, 30 hours a week with the church. And I did that for 7 years. And I did counseling for 3 years, then the grant ran out, and they shifted me over to multicultural affairs, which is an interesting position for a middle-aged white guy. And so I was director of multicultural affairs and quarter-time counselor, and we did that for 4 years, and it worked out really well for that campus and stuff. It wouldn't be a long-term thing, but eventually I burned out. I got to the place where I was preaching a sermon. I got 1/3 of the way through it, and I stepped off the platform and walked out. I was so burned out. I just could not. I was looking around, people were yawning, people were kind of looking at their watches. It's like, I'm boring these people to death, no use doing this. I left, which is not something you should really do when you're the pastor. And they thought I was sick or something. It's like, yeah, I'm sick, I'm burned out. And at that point, I had to make a decision. Do I quit the paying job, the School of Mines, or do I give up the church? And it's like, well, here's my calling. Develop people to reach their fullest potential in Christ. I need to stay with the church. That was my original calling. And so I talked to Dean of Students, Pat Mann. You guys might know her, some of you might know her. And I said, I'm going to have to let this go. And she said, well, I kind of saw the writing on the wall. And so I did. The church restructured and was able to pay me a little bit more, mostly in housing allowance. And my wife has a good job, so we make it on that. But at that time, I had my degree, obviously, and was licensed as a counselor. I started doing some contracting work for Fountain Springs, and they were paying me to counsel their people. And then that program kind of ran out. And at that point, I decided it's time to start my own practice. I think I'm a slide behind here. Let's try the next one. This is our first building. We built that in 2010. And then next one, we added an addition in 2016. So this entrepreneurial journey has involved capital property and building buildings and people's elbows getting worn out from laying tile, and we decided we as a congregation did $40,000 worth of labor here, but we decided we will just hire somebody to do the rest of this rather than I lost a really good vacuum sweeper to drywall dust. Okay, next one. So then I started my own practice, and that was in 2016, Practical Christian Counseling Incorporated. And I decided I need to do this more like I did the church plant, less like I did the vending machine business. And so I went to the learning center where they have the business development incubator thing, and talked to somebody, got a coach there. They gave me a whole list of things to do. Things about finding an attorney, finding an accountant, doing some market research, writing up a business plan. They helped me write up the whole business plan, talking to the bank. And so we went that whole route, and were able to give a pretty successful start to the business. Started advertising on Christian radio. I kind of market toward pastors, and I sent all the pastors in town a little poster that said, I had a picture of a guy with his fishing pole and his line all tangled up in it, and he's trying to untangle it all. And I said, Pastor, do you have time to untangle all this? And it's like, you know what, you can refer to somebody that you could trust, because a lot of times pastors are a little hesitant with mental health professionals, like, oh, they're going to talk them out of their faith, and I've not really ever found that with any mental health professionals I've run into, but I know that that's a thing with a lot of pastors, and so pastors, I can help you. And so it's a pretty selective niche, okay, and so the practice hasn't grown phenomenally in the last 3 years. It basically pays for itself. It pays for my advertising, it pays for my certification and licensure and continuing education and QuickBooks and all the other kind of stuff that you got to have. Pays for that, but I never draw a paycheck. It's like, well, why would you keep doing it? Well, we're right back to here. It's like it's a calling. I feel called to help come alongside people, walk with them toward wholeness, and develop them to their fullest potential in Christ. So I do a lot of work with couples. I do a lot of work with men, and quite a bit actually with women and teenagers. And so I've got these two entrepreneurial kind of things going on with the church and the counseling practice, and the work isn't done. Maybe the next slide. One thing we started in 17 at the church was Celebrate Recovery. And I just call myself the head cheerleader for Celebrate Recovery because we have a volunteer ministry. It's a complete volunteer ministry. And I'm the pastoral lead on it, but we have a ministry director. And so I'm just the head cheerleader. But it has turned out to be actually not so much an economic engine, but maybe a ministry people gathering engine for the whole ministry, because a lot of people need to be in recovery, and Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered 12-step program where we just basically name Jesus Christ as our higher power, because we recognize that he's really the only higher power that has any higher power, and so that's kind of how we look at it. And so we started Celebrate Recovery a couple of years ago. In the future, we got so much more to do to be able to develop people to reach their fullest potential in Christ. Next slide, if you would, please. This is the current building with the addition. We still need to add a wing so that we can have a lot more small groups for Celebrate Recovery. And we need to have we also host Life Inc. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Love Inc. And they have the Life Inc. ministry. It's adult education. and I teach common sense parenting for that, and that's one of the court-ordered kind of parenting classes, and I provide that. And we need, this would house like the ability to have 8 to 10 classes and children's space. It'd be a 2-story kind of thing. And then in the future, to continue to develop people to reach their fullest potential, we have a vision for a community center. Let's try the next slide. And it'd be the Word of Hope Community Center. I got an architect to donate about $10,000 worth of work to us over in East River. And so he designed this beautiful building, or is actually one of his sub-architects, a lady. And it's basically a community center that's multi-purpose with daycare that would be have the option for people to be able to work off hours at their daycare. It's for the working poor, basically, as a community center for the working poor, and Life Inc. classes, and Celebrate Recovery, and respite care for people with special needs kids, and all kinds of biblically based kind of ministry. So that is the vision. Next slide. I'm not sure what's next. I guess I can look here. Oh, so here's our little piece of property up here. It's a big triangle. And then all this is empty, and it's owned by the same donor, the same guy that donated this. We had to pay for the replatting. And so I actually was able to get Hanny Shaffy to get one of his guys to do a pre-plat for us of what this whole piece of property was, because I was going to try to convince our denomination to buy this, and then we would sell it to business owners, and we keep these 2 acres or 3 acres over here and build a community center and have athletic fields, and we could have, I don't know, Chick-fil-A, or we could have, Pizza Ranch or something out here. And they didn't want to tie up that much money for however long it would take, and it still hasn't sold. I feel like God's holding it for us, and someday somebody's going to just buy this property and donate this to us, or they're going to give us, Doc, who owns the land, would give us like a primo deal, because he has the same kind of vision and mission. He just can't give it to us. And so it's like, okay, I could buy it for the primo deal. Would he be okay with us selling off the rest? And he said he would. So if anybody's interested. Okay. So anyway, that's what's coming down the road. It's all in the under the life purpose of develop people. Because I love God. He's changed my life. He's given me purpose. He's set me free from cynicism, and just given me hope and happiness. And going to School of Mines, working at School of Mines, really helped me with building relationships and building collaborations with different people and entities on campus and off campus. And so that became a big part of kind of my community focus, rather than just here's my church, and so short answer is not really for marketing to some high schools and stuff. Not that if I were invited for some reason, I'm just not pushing myself out there. If I were invited for some reason, and I keep forgetting to repeat the question, hopefully you guys are getting it. Certainly I would put something together and bring it.
I have another question, Scott.
Okay.
How do you sort of walk that line between somebody just wanting to visit you as a pastor versus they need a full-on counseling session? So how do you work that out?
Thank you for that. Leah's asking, how do I work it out between somebody just wanting to visit me as a pastor or needing a full-on counseling session? And that is a dual relationship kind of thing that I've had to work through, and I've actually put in my informed consent form that if somebody's seeking me out for counseling, they don't attend my church. They recognize I'm a pastor of a church. I won't hold the church or the district or anything liable for anything. And so basically what it comes down to, if they're attending my church, they're not a client, they're a parishioner. And that's basically how it is. And if somebody just kind of dropped in and said, I need to talk to a pastor, can we talk? And I've had that before. We'll just sit down and we'll talk right now, you know, and I'm not going to bill them or anything. But if they're contacting me through my website or the phone number that gets publicized, and they're looking for a counselor, that's billable hours. So. Yep.
Deanna, Becket again. I'm not sure how to ask this. You said, you know, the entrepreneurial journey, and it involves the church. And I don't know if it's my mind or everybody else is kind of confused. How do you differentiate the two, or do you separate them into, you know, the church is a nonprofit and your business, or is it all a, you know, business mind? So I'm not sure how that's worded in the question.
I would use the word ministry. And so you're asking, I think what you're asking is, you know, the church, how do you wrap that up into an entrepreneurial kind of thing? Is it, you know, is it part of a business? And I understand that everybody here is a business person and they think business. Well, there's a business aspect to the church, and there's the whole startup. And Gordon and I were kind of talking about this one day, and he said, you know, that's actually an entrepreneurial endeavor, is to start a church. It's starting something new. It does have to make money somehow, you know, it needs to pay for itself somehow. But it's different in that it's not just me. I got to have a team, but I've kind of been the key person or the linchpin in the whole thing. And so, but I see the kind of the whole package and everything I was putting up on the screen as this is kind of what I feel God is leading me to lead. And so I'm leading a church, leading a practice, cheerleading a Celebrate Recovery. And then there's the other things, other community things with ministerial and the radio and the book and those kind of things. But it's all part of me, what I feel like God's doing in me or through me. And but that doesn't mean I couldn't ever leave the church. You know, at some point I will, you know, and that'll be handed off to somebody. If I go away, practical Christian counseling goes away probably, but not necessarily the other stuff.
I guess maybe a follow-up to that is, do you consider them different boxes that you kind of go in and do your stuff and then switch boxes, or is it just kind of under one umbrella that you?
Yeah, the umbrella is there's a bit of an umbrella, but it's kind of in a watermark, you know. It's there, and it's basically me, okay. But they are individual boxes. So I actually have my own Facebook page, a Practical Christian Counseling Facebook page, Word of Hope Facebook page, and a Celebrate Recovery Facebook page. And I can administrate in all those, but I've got other people that do the other ones. And they all have their own website or webpage too. And so yeah, they're kind of treated as individual things. You know, I've got an arrangement with the church so I can do counseling in the church office. The missions align enough that they're okay with me being there, and then I compensate the church a little bit, but it's a way better deal than any office space you're going to be able to rent. So it works out pretty well from that standpoint. So yes.
John Schneider to put out this. You had mentioned that your practical Christian counseling is self-sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
What is your plan for growth? And with that growth, not blurring the lines and keeping it separate, so that,
right.
Because at some point in life you have to plan about retirement and those things down the line. So what is your plan and growth just on the counseling side, not so much the ministry side?
Thanks for asking that. So he's asking, what are my plans for growth for the Christian counseling part of it? And the plan is to grow that. And one of the primary ways I'm working on this year is to get credentialed with insurance companies. But you have to do it, each individual insurance company, you have to get credentialed with them, and it's a big long process. And so I am credentialed like with Blue Cross, but out of network, you know, a provider, but not in network or something like that. And so when I get to the place where I'm really able to bill the insurance companies, that's when that thing really starts to grow, you know, and I'm able to say, okay, we take TRICARE, we take Blue Cross, we take Military One Source, we take a variety of and so that's part of it. Another part of it is getting the book out there and marketing that out there, at least in the Christian community, the church community. That'll expand the referral basis. Eventually pulling out of the church office, going into a separate office or going into an office with others, and combining and being at a church might actually be a hindrance to me at this point, you know, being in a church office, because if a pastor feels insecure, you know, he's got a need, he needs to refer somebody. Am I going to send them to somebody else's church and fall in love with that pastor, and then I lose people out of the church? And it's like, hey, we worked hard to get you, and you know, and we love you, we care about you, and so so getting out of that office. So those are some of my thoughts and plans on growth. Yeah, Giesel.
Cecily on the Farm Bureau. So you've taken a lot of different, I don't know, I guess directions or boxes, as Deanna said. How is your decision process on things you can take on and things you can't, and what things haven't you taken on?
Well, at some point, when I quit the School of Mines, I decided, you know, I can't work another 50, 60-hour job. But I had broken out of my four walls enough to know that this ministry or whatever it is I'm doing needs to have more of a community focus and build collaborations more than just have my nice little thing up here on Jolly Lane. And so at first I was taking on everything. You know, I was sticking my foot in everything. I was volunteering up at the middle school. I joined the ministerial and became an officer on the ministerial, and just started saying yes to a lot of things. Now I'm kind of getting to the place like, okay, I think I figured out where my focus needs to be, and so I backed off of things. And so now I'm stepping back from things, and now if they do not absolutely fit in, it's like I couldn't join another board. You know, I couldn't become a volunteer here. I thought about it. It's like, oh, I want to jump in because they need volunteer and I could help. And it's like, I can't do that. And so I just have to say no to any other long-term service kinds of things, being a part of another entity, because I've got at least 4 of them going right now. And yeah, and but if they're kind of one-off things like speaking engagement, you know, or well, mainly a speaking engagement, or something with Life Inc. where I'm teaching, I'm already plugged into that anyway. Brad, how are we doing on time?
Okay.
Okay, last question.
So I Pastor Brad Clausen, Woodland Court Ministries. I got 2 things, right? Research and planning, but you have a wild card, which is called God, right? and you engage God in your planning program or idea factory. Mm-hmm. How do you determine when it's God and when it's you, and how do you?
Oh gosh, Brad, that's a long one. It's pretty confusing. Okay.
Yeah. Does God get the blame if it doesn't go right?
Okay, God gets to define whether it's going right or not, because God was getting the blame that Word of Hope Church wasn't growing.
Yeah.
You know, well, did I feel like God led me to that? Yeah. Was that, you know, did I have confirmation from others? Did Pat and I, a lot of times I test things with my wife, you know, and she prays about it. And if we're kind of in agreement on it, we're going with it like it's God. Okay. And I don't hear voices necessarily. Sometimes I feel like a nudge in my spirit, you know, that kind of thing. But I don't get a burning bush or anything. So I kind of like, okay, if it works toward the mission, if it would glorify God, if it would help people, if it's in my skill set and my gifting, and I'm feeling the nudge, then maybe this is God and we will move forward with it. But then he gets to define what is success. I cannot define that for him. And so it may not be the big flashy thing. It means it's a success.
Good answer to a tough question. Okay, let's give it up one more time for Scott.